Rick Warren is the pastor of Saddleback Church in Orange County, California. He's the author of The Purpose-Driven Life, which has sold more than 30 million copies worldwide.
Thanks.
And he's one of the most respected and influential Christian leaders in the country. Rick has had a significant impact on my life. I've traveled with him to Africa. He has told me to not do things from time to time. He is
Mostly the whole rapping thing.
Yeah,
That was his
he was like, "Hey, buddy, thanks for sending the demo track. I got to tell you,
Your drum rapping is absolute toilet water."
He is one of the most, one of my heroes and one of the people I respect most. And this crazy political season, going on right now, we thought, who can help us navigate these waters?
And is it that crazy?
And so we wanted to reach out to him. Our very own Aaron Hambury recently spoke with Pastor Rick about how Christians can navigate these political polarizing times, the tension of wanting to exercise a civic responsibility even when the actions of some candidates themselves don't match up with our values. Here is part of our conversation with Rick Warren.
Pastor Warren, you undoubtedly pastor many people who are both passionate Republicans, passionate Democrats, and probably everywhere in between. How do you approach that as a pastor?
Yeah, that's a good question to start with. Of course, I have to be the pastor of everybody, and I think there are 4 or 5 principles I just try to keep in the back of my mind in every election cycle. The first one would be like the temporariness of politics. That it doesn't last. Every single election, those who are running will say, this is the most important election in history. Well, not necessarily. I mean, you could say that about every single election. And the bottom line is, whoever gets elected is going to be out in 4 years or 8 years. So it's just temporary. And the people who, the Bible warns us not to put your trust in princes. And princes are leaders. That's another word. One of the reasons why we don't know what the Bible says is because the Bible doesn't use the word politics. But the Bible has a lot to say about leadership. And actually what I encourage people to do is, if you go to the book of Proverbs, and you got to get a modern translation. If you look up the word nation, for instance, in the New Living Translation in the book of Proverbs, it'll give you a bunch of advice on what makes a strong nation and what makes a weak nation. And anytime you see the word king in the book of Proverbs, it's referring to leader. And actually, if you take the Message paraphrase and you look up the word leader or leaders, you'll find a lot of verses that talk about kings that actually give advice on the kind of leadership that a nation needs and the kind of leadership that it doesn't need. I could give you 8 or 10 verses just right off the bat that talk about the kind of leadership we need, the kind of leadership that we don't need. The Bible does not talk about policy. It does talk about character and has a lot to say about character. Politics is temporary, and make sure you're not spending all your energy on something that's not going to last. The bottom line is that in the last 50 years, Christians have often looked to government to bring national revival. And nowhere in history has government been the source of revival. It just doesn't. If you're going to bet on revival, bet on the church. Bet on God's people, because the church outlasts every single government. And when you go through all of the isms of Nazism and communism and even secularism, all of the different isms, they come and go, but the church is what's going to last. So bet on the church. 1,000 years from today, if Jesus Christ has not come back, we don't know when he's coming back. The Bible says to always be ready, but we don't know. 1,000 years from today, there won't be a Microsoft, there won't be a Apple, there won't be a Starbucks, there won't be a United States of America, because no kingdom lasts forever. Where's the Hittite Empire? Where's the Assyrian? Where's the Sumerian Empire? They're nowhere to be found. And so we often put our trust in the wrong things to bring change and to bring heart change in particular. For instance, like there's a place for laws. Laws are good. Laws can regulate behavior. But the book of Romans teaches us that the law can't change your heart. And so you could make a law that says, no more bigotry, no more racism, and you can stop people from acting in racist ways. But no law is going to change a bigot into a lover. Only Jesus can do that. And so I'm in the transformation business, not in the behavioral change business. And we don't expect unbelievers to act like believers until they are. In fact, the Bible says they can't. They don't have the power to act like a believer until they have the Holy Spirit inside them. So I think the starting point in an election year is just to recognize the limitations of politics, that it can't change heart, and that when you get into law is always downstream from culture. If you want to change culture, you got to go further upstream and deal with art and music and sports and stuff like that. If you're trying to make a law about something, by that time it's already in the water.
Now, it seems like there are generally probably two ends of the spectrum when it comes to Christians in politics. There's, on the one hand, the guy who's blowing up Facebook, he's really politically active, he cares deeply. And on the other end, there's kind of a group of people who want to be apolitical, so they just avoid it entirely. Is that perspective, is just avoiding politics in broad terms, is that an option for Christians, or is it even possible to be apolitical?
First, what a pastor can do and what a member can do are two different things. Because in leadership's like as a pyramid, and as a pyramid goes toward the top, it's narrower and narrower. And so there are things that I can't do that a member can do simply because of the position that I'm in as a shepherd, as you pointed out earlier, to be a shepherd of the whole flock. I can have personal political convictions. In fact, I do. I hold very deep political convictions on what I think is wise and what I think is unwise, what I think is right, what I think is wrong, what I think will work, what I think won't work. But it's not my role to use that authority in an area that God did not expect me to have authority. My primary job is to care for the souls of people and not to convince them to my political views. But a member, of course, can have political views and can actually share them. But the most important thing is the Bible says it's like witnessing. You're to do this in a gentle and respectful way. And here's the real issue. The people, if you talk to Americans pretty much agree on what they want for people. We want freedom for people. We want fairness for people. We want prosperity for people. We want safety for people. What politics is all about is disagreeing how to get there. And so, some people say, well, we're going to do it through government, and other people say we'll do it through the market, and other people say we'll do it through personal responsibility. And so it's the disagreement over the means of how you get there, which are very real differences. And that's where it's okay to have people of goodwill on different sides of issues that aren't moral issues. But even in the moral issues, I am still commanded by Christ to treat everybody with respect. So even if I totally disagree with your politics, I do not have a right to demean you, to degrade you, to put you down. The Bible says when you share the hope that's within you, share it with gentleness and respect. I am not allowed to hate anybody. Doesn't mean I agree with them. It doesn't mean I believe that what their position is right. But I'm not allowed to hate anybody. I'm not allowed to be disrespectful of anybody. They're made in the image of God. And the problem is that people allow politics to trump their faith. And what I mean on that is they get so excited about their political views, which can be legitimately, right and wrong. For instance, I happen to believe that life begins at the point of conception. So I believe that it's wrong. Abortion is wrong. But I'm still not allowed to demean, degrade, or disrespect somebody who doesn't see it the way I believe the Bible says it.
I just saw a piece of data that said that this election, the 2016 election, is the first, at least in the United States, where the largest religious group, when you break down, religious voting, is the people who aren't religious at all. So the nuns, as they're called, are a larger percentage of the voting bloc than Christians, Jews, Muslims, and on and on. That's like a complete reversal from a large swath of American history, so from early 70s on or so, that said that the way Christians influence culture is in the voting booth. Now that that's just not the case, or at least it's diminishing, how is it that Christians engage culture?
Yeah. Well, first, I would welcome any change that takes Christianity out of a political viewpoint, because in the past years, of course, the word evangelical got associated because we had an evangelical president in President Bush. Everything that people disagreed with that he did got blamed on evangelicals. And so that's the danger of associating with any politician of any stripe. People know that I did the first inaugural prayer for Obama. What they don't know is that 4 years earlier, I opened the inauguration of President Bush, but nobody even noticed because it wasn't considered controversial. And I have friends on both sides of the aisle, but I'm in favor of. I don't even think it's a bad thing that Christians might not be a majority, because we've never been a majority. That's in any culture except the last 150 years in America. In the past, about 26% of Americans were classified as evangelicals. That number varied even higher. And about 25% of Americans were called Catholics. And so people would look at that and go, well, if you get the Catholic and evangelical vote, you've got a majority of opinion. What this election has proven is that's very, very fractured. Evangelicals are all over the map on who they voted for in the primaries. They were all over the map. And there's even a difference between those who go to church every week, as you saw those polls, and who they voted for, and the people who claim to be evangelicals, but were not going to church. They were cultural Catholics, or they're cultural evangelicals, or they're cultural Baptists, or cultural charismatics, or whatever. And their voting and their beliefs were not really attached. I think in this situation, Christians need to look more back at the 21st century is more like the first century, in which the fastest growing years of Christianity, of our faith, were the first 300 years. Christianity grew faster, more rapidly in the first 300 years of the faith than at any other time. Now, first, that's because it was young, it was new, and you always grow fast in the early years. But during those 300 years, there were three things that were true. Number one, it was against the law to be a Christian. You were more likely to be, crucified by the Romans. Number two, there were no church buildings. There were no church buildings for the first 300 years of the church. People met in homes. I've been in the earliest still standing church, which is in Malula in Syria, which was made in about 305 AD. And unfortunately, it's been destroyed by ISIS, bullets and all of that going on there. And so in those things where it was not culturally advantageous to be a Christian, that's when Christianity survived, and not only survived, but thrived, because it was growing. And the third thing that happened is as the plague and some of those diseases began to fill the urban areas, people began to leave the cities and Christians moved into the urban areas to care for the dying, and that's where the phrase "see how they love one another" began to show. We should be known for our love and our diligence and our respectfulness more than we should be known for our political opinions. My problem is that I don't want the gospel to get co-opted by a view. For instance, if a woman comes onto my church campus, our church campus, and the first thing she sees is a anti-abortion table, okay, and she's had an abortion before she even gets into the building. She's already turned off and turned around and left. And so the good news is not a political statement. The good news is a salvation statement. And I just don't want that to get co-opted. So the important thing in this season is have your views, but say them respectfully, and certainly desire that you would be more known for your lifestyle, your Jesus lifestyle, and the message of grace, than to be known for what you believe about trade, or what you believe about immigration, or what you believe about any of these other things. Those opinions are important, but they're not the most important message that we're called as a Christian to share.
Okay, Pastor Warren, one last question. And for this, I want to ask you to be my pastor, to be the pastor of our listeners for just a little bit. This election is a little weird, and I think in some ways it's unprecedented, to where both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, are advocating for things that are morally ambiguous at best, in some cases even reprehensible. And that's left some of us just confused about what we should do. We want to be Christians first, but we're also, Americans who feel some responsibility to be involved. What's your advice? What would you say to us?
Okay, a couple principles. First place, realize that throughout history, God has even used bad leaders for his purposes. God is still in control. He's still on the throne. I'm preaching through the life of Daniel right now, and God used Nebuchadnezzar, who in no sense was a Christian believer, but used Nebuchadnezzar to accomplish his will. God used Pharaoh. God used Caesar to make a census that got Joseph to go back to his hometown to fulfill the prophecy of Jesus being born in Bethlehem. So God, the Bible says the heart of the king is in the hand of the Lord, and he turns it whithersoever he wishes. So my God is bigger than who's running for office. So this is a unique election where, for the first time in history, 2 out of 3 people, Americans, don't like either candidate. In other words, they say, I don't trust either candidate in terms of their character. And that's a first, where 2 out of 3 people say, I don't really like either or. What you can't do is not vote. If you want to write in a candidate because of your conviction, well, that's appropriate. But to stay home is inappropriate, because somebody died for you to have the freedom to vote. So even if you vote, you write in a candidate, the one thing you can't do is not vote because of your stewardship responsibility. You might not vote for either the candidate, but you do need to vote. And so to sit it out is not an option.